Hello and greetings to all. First of all, I would love and like to thank all of you who have joined us today globally. Hey, I am Dr. Sritej Jagtap from MGM Dental College and Hospital and having a post of State Scientific Head from Cyanodent. I heartily welcome you all today for this exclusive webinar. I would like to thank the founder and CEO of Cyanodent, Dr. Anmol Bagaria, and Team Cyanodent for organizing this webinar. Cyanodent, Global Healthcare for All. First of all, I would love to introduce Cyanodent. Cyanodent brings you Cyanodent International and Cyanodent India. Cyanodent is a unique international digital healthcare platform, first time in world. Revolutionary change brought in India by bringing a digital healthcare platform that will provide and enhance a good relationship between patients and doctors, also enables a real-time appointment scheduling system. Our goal to create easy and fast access to healthcare services and is here Cyanodent to create a precious and healthy smile on our patient faces, always with minimum effort and maximum welfare. Cyanodent International has brought for you research cell, blog section, and educational programs for doctors to enhance their knowledge, skills, and keep them updated regarding the recent advances and latest treatment. We are currently doing free webinars for students, dentists, senior practitioners from India, as well as across the globe, which are different from the webinar era going on. We also design papers, mock tests, and send latest textbooks to budding students. We are trying to bring globally historic changes by uplifting our honorable profession more and more every day. Cyanodent is also working for social welfare and humanity to enhance the quality of life by providing healthcare needs, health awareness, and free treatments. I would love to introduce our eminent speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Vijay Kumar Girhe. Dr. Vijay sir is a versatile maxillofacial surgeon working enthusiastically in maxillofacial arena. He graduated from MUHS in 2005, completed his master's from the esteemed Institute College of Dental Sciences, Davangere, Karnataka, with an excellent academic acknowledgement. He is dedicated academician working as professor and head of Department of Implantology at SRRSM Dental College, Hingoli. He is a renowned face in the field of craniomaxillofacial surgery. He is extensively working in the field of surgical oncology. He has keen interest in basic implant surgeries, all bone augmentation procedures, full mouth rehabilitation, and all complex cases of implant surgeries. He has successfully conducted many workshops on basics and advanced implantology. He has conducted many workshops on basic and advanced implantology. He has national and international scientific publications to his credit. He is Honorable General Secretary of Maharashtra State Chapter of Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons of India. He was Executive Committee member of National Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons of India. So here I welcome Dr. Vijay Kumar sir on the topic demystifying post-COVID mucormycosis, what, how, and when. Just lastly to add, sir has an experience of successfully treating 110 plus mucormycosis cases in 2021 itself. We from the team of Cyanodent welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Zitesh and Dr. Anmol and entire team of Cyanodent, Dr. Pratik and all. I must congratulate you guys because you are doing a fabulous job for profession. You are going to be a good connecting link between the patients and the doctors and the students. So probably you are gelling all of them, practitioners, students, patients and everything. I think you have a solution for everyone on your platform. I wish you all the best. Keep doing a rocking work. Thank you. So thank you for having me today on your platform, for sharing my experience. So good evening, all the listeners. So today we are going to talk about today we are going to discuss on a topic, demystifying post-COVID mucormycosis. What, how, and when. Friends, basically, I am going to talk about what is the role of dental surgeon as a doctor in early detection of mucormycosis, how we can detect them, how we can treat them, and how we can prevent the their complication in these patients. So we are going to mainly focus on a role of dental surgeon in early detection and management of mucormycosis. Sorry, friends, before starting the presentation, I would like to put forth a disclaimer that the guidelines in the management of mucormycosis, they are dynamic and they are changing every now and then. And every one of us now need to keep ourselves updated with the recent guideline. I have made each and every effort to keep my presentation evidence-based as well as my personal experience-based. So I tried to have a good blender of my own experience with existing data. So friends, post-COVID mucormycosis, all the electronic media, all the print media, and everywhere in a discussion, in a gossip, in a public talk, everywhere, mucormycosis, and mucormycosis is at high. And is this mucormycosis is a new disease? So answer is definitely not, because previously it was seen in one of the rare disease in a patient who had uncontrolled diabetes, who had hematological malignancies, a patient with organ transplant, and on immunosuppressor. So particularly it was a disease of patient in whom the immunity was suppressed to a great extent, and probably a year ago it was one of the rare disease. Then we know this mucormycosis is an opportunistic fungi. It is a normal common cell of the paranasal sinuses. It cannot infect from one person to other. Then if it is known disease, if it is one of the normal common cell of head and neck, then why we are discussing about mucormycosis today? Because there is sudden rise in a prevalence. How, to what extent? If I have to share my own experience, before this pandemic, annually I used to do 5 to 6 cases in a year. Means hardly like monthly, not even a case in a month. In our 2 months, one of the case I used to do. And today, if you look at this, these are my OT list. Every day, like every day, 4, 5, 6. This was the number of cases which I'm dealing since last 45 days. And friends, that's why we are discussing it today, because the incidence has gone almost 300 times up. And why this incidence is so much, and how to deal it, how to diagnose it at early stage, because this is a condition which has known mortality of 30 to 70%. Forget about morbidity. Morbidity is because they required extensive ablative surgical procedure. So friends, so we are going to discuss why mucormycosis is rampant today, particularly after second wave of mucormycosis. So everything probably we have learned, we have understood, and we read about, like, is the steroid that is responsible? Is remdesivir used in the management of the COVID is responsible, or that's tocilizumab or tocilizumab responsible, or it is a post-COVID hyperglycemic state? Increased serum ferritin level, or increased use of zinc, or it is industrial oxygen that has been used. So what are the causes for this sudden rise in mucormycosis? So when I went into literature, there are no level 1 evidences. So probably there are many hypotheses, but no level 1 evidence. So I thought, let's look into my own data. And then this is I think data before 1 week. Today we have operated more than 126 cases. And friends, when I did an analysis for 103 operated cases and 163 reported cases, like the patient who were operated out of that 24% of the patients were non-COVID detected. Means probably they might have had asymptomatic COVID, but they were never hospitalized. They never received any medication for COVID. The post-COVID mucormycosis was without use of any medications, which is being blamed for mucormycosis. So probably, yes, the drugs or medication may be additive factors or can be one of the risk factor, but they are not a sole etiological factor. Steroids is not a new drug. It has been used since ages. Probably the patients with autoimmune diseases, the arthritis and all, and other many medical conditions, steroid is probably is a drug of choice for many diseases, and it has been used since ages. And there are very few cases which has been reported because of the mucormycosis because of the use of steroid. Yes, definitely in steroid in a COVID, the dose of steroid which is used is definitely high. So probably irrational use of steroid can be one of the contributing factor, but it is not a sole etiological factor. In my cases, only 34% of the patient they received remdesivir and had mucormycosis. If almost more than 66% of the patient, if they are having mucormycosis without receiving the remdesivir, probably it has a very weak correlation as an etiological factor. Tocilizumab was only 96% of the patients were without tocilizumab because it was very rare drug. Now, like, it is very difficult to get in a current scenario. So it is unlike, yes, definitely it may as an immune modulator, definitely it is suppressing the immunity and immune reactions, and probably it may have a role theoretically, but practically speaking, only like 5 or 4% of the patient they have received. So we cannot say that that is a sole etiological factor. Yes, then what are the factors which have high impact, particularly hyperglycemic state? The patient which we operated, 94.6 means almost 95% of the patients were with hyperglycemic state. Then why hyperglycemia is common in a post-COVID? Because previously many of them were diabetic before COVID also, and few patients they landed with hyperglycemic state in COVID, and that is lead to mucormycosis. Particularly, and serum ferritin level was another consistent finding in our study. So if you have to say summarize all factors which are going to be, yes, definitely it is very difficult to pinpoint a single etiological factor for mucormycosis. Mucormycosis is an infectious disease, and as like any other infectious disease, altered host immunity is the most important factor and responsible factor for having a mucormycosis. Because in healthy individuals, even if they are exposed to this fungal spore of mucor, they will not have a mucormycosis because immunity will take care of those spores. But if you have added factor like hyperglycemic state, increased serum ferritin level, and other factor what has been said, probably it is a multifactorial, but the most important thing is host immunity, then hyperglycemic state, increased serum ferritin level, along with the minor correlation for some of the other factors. Then how does this mucormycosis lead to such an extensive craniofacial involvement? How it lead to osteomyelitis? That is the next question. Now, I hope it is clear for all of us why there is increased incidence. Then how it affect or how it lead to mucormycosis, or basically mucormycosis, what we are talking about is it is a type of osteomyelitis or a fungal osteomyelitis. So how this mucormycosis lead to fungal osteomyelitis? Mucormycosis due to a favorable condition, which includes altered host response, increased hyperglycemic state, increased serum ferritin, probably use of other drugs. So all collective factors. So local acidic pH is another important factor. Increased serum ferritin. So these all the factors are like increased serum ferritin and acidic environment favors the multiplication of the mucor spore, and these mucor starts multiplying, and it lead to fungal colony formation. And this fungi, mucor is a fungus which has typical affinity for medium to small size vessel. So it invades inside the vessel. Inside the vessel, it forms the thrombi, fungal thrombi, and that thrombi occludes the vessel. it goes inside the vessel, lead to occlusion of the vessel, ischemia of the area which is supplied by that, and lead to ultimately avascular necrosis. I will again come, like this fungi in a favorable environment multiply. It forms fungal colony. This fungi has affinity towards the vessel. It goes inside the vessel, invades the vessel, and forms the fungal thrombi inside the vessel, which lead to ischemia and avascular necrosis. And that's why whatever all the, along with this, what are the other proposed theory, like the post-COVID patients, they have high incidence of thromboembolic episode. So sometime it is maybe possible that not only the fungal thrombi which are leading to occlusion, even in some occasion probably the thromboembolic emboli might be occluding the vessel and leading to. As this vessel, this fungi has affinity for medium to small size vessel. That's why the area which is otherwise less affected, that is a midface or maxilla, is more commonly affected. Now, before I think there is some technical error. I'm just logging in again. Just give me a moment.
Yes, sir. Sure.
Okay, sir. No problem.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you can log in, no problem.
Please enable the screen sharing.
Sir, I have done it. Kindly
Okay,
please
thank
check.
you. Yeah, thank you. Slides are visible now.
Yes, sir, they are
Yes, sir,
visible.
it is properly visible. Audio and
Okay,
audio is also.
sorry for the technical issues. I hope now it should go smooth. Okay, so we have seen that we have seen on the prevalence or the predisposing factors, the etiopathogenesis of mucormycosis. Now coming to clinical presentation, how this mucor can present. Friends, before COVID era, all the mucormycosis cases which were involving the craniofacial region, they were known as rhinocerebral mucormycosis. But in a current scenario, now we need to rethink and reclassify this disease which is affecting the oral cavity, because completely each and every case is not a rhinocerebral, because it is not involving always nose, orbit, and we're not going to brain in each and every case. So that depending on the clinical presentation, which parts are involved, we can subclassify the orofacial mucormycosis into four categories. So sinoalveolar, in which only maxillary sinus and maxillary bone is involved, or that can be called as sinomaxillary. Then other variant is sino-orbital, in which your ethmoid and sphenoid sinus are involved, and from that it can spread to orbit. Third variant is sino-orbitomaxillary, so in which ethmoid, sphenoid, orbit, maxillary sinus and maxillary bone is involved. Those are sino-orbitomaxillary cases. And the fourth variant can be rhinocerebral. So along with sino-orbitomaxillary involvement, if there is intracranial extension, that can be rhinocerebral, which is one of the fatal variant amongst all this. So we'll see how this patient can report to us one by one. So coming to the clinical manifestation or clinical presentation in sinomaxillary or sinoalveolar case. So the clinical presentation varies when patient is reporting you after the mucor infection has started. So we have already seen the etiopathogenesis. It invades the vessel. It leads to oculovascular occlusion, ischemia, and necrosis. So if the patient now, when this patient can report after COVID, so as early as on the 5th day or 4th day, when they are tested positive for COVID, they can report with mucormycosis. Particularly in active COVID patients, the sino-orbital, particularly ethmoid, sphenoid, and orbital involvement is more common than other variant. Other variants are also there, but this is more common presentation. In a sinoalveolar cases, particularly if the patient report to us after the initiation or starting of the mucor infection, within first 3 to 8 days, the clinical presentation, absolutely patient may come report with severe pain in the orofacial region. Severe pain which is of non-odontogenic origin. Like if we see, check all the teeth, there will be no dental finding or no odontogenic cause for that severe pain. Patient will complain of headache, like all the signs of your sinusitis, like headache, numbness, the tingling over this, heaviness on this part of the area, sinusitis, or the simplest symptom can be itching. Particularly, patient will say, sometimes I feel like pricking the gingiva. So these are, and when you see this patient at early stage, clinically, there will be tenderness on the teeth or all the teeth of that particular quadrant. There may not be a pocket formation. There may not be attachment loss, because clinically significant finding will not be initially there. You see, if you see clinically, like in this case, there will be nothing, absolutely healthy gingiva. And when we get a scan done in these patients, you can see the sinus which is filled with or obliterated. You can see that there is a haziness or the sinus which is filled. And your radiologist probably will interpret as the feature suggestive of early sinusitis. Now, radiologists are also aware, so they are now commenting that possibility, as the case is post-COVID, there is a possibility of fungal sinusitis. So they are reporting, but in an initial phase, like before a month ago, they used to say early signs of sinusitis. and there becomes a problem, whether it's a sinusitis or a mucormycosis, because this is an early stage and just the ischemia or avascular necrosis has started. So each and every case will not. So this is like a acute osteomyelitis or avian, like avascular necrosis. And because of that, radiologically, what we are used to see, like typical moth-eaten appearance and all, will not be seen at early stage. Only inflammation and obliteration and filling of the sinus may be seen. At this stage, when we take these patients for operation, you can see the vessel. These vessels are completely occluded. They are thrombosed. Like when we do the cadaveric dissection, the kind of vessel we get entirely thrombosed and occluded vessel will be there. This is the case. You can see the greater palatine vessel completely thrombosed. This is a descending palatine vessel which is completely thrombosed. Here also you can see the greater palatine vessel which is completely thrombosed. So this is a picture. Clinically, it will look as healthy as like this, but actually the involvement or the vascular occlusion is like this. And when we open it for surgery, when we drill at multiple places, there will be absolutely no supply to entire maxilla, and there will be only yellowish discolored maxilla. There will be no erosions, no absolute, some degree of mottling we may see on the exploration, but the ultimate sign when we do a drilling on this bone, that bone will not bleed. And if the bone is not bleeding, that is a sign of a vascular necrosis. Till we get bleeding, we have to remove that. This is a vascular necrosis. This video will clarify your doubt how exactly how we can differentiate between viable bone and non-viable bone. Yes, these videos clearly show how to differentiate between vital and non-vital bone. And friend, here I want to warn you, because at early stage, as a dental surgeon, we are bound to make few mistakes. Like every time whenever patient report to us with non-specific or non-specific orofacial pain, when we focus on few teeth, and if you get tenderness on one or two teeth, we think that probably this is a cracked tooth syndrome or the tooth has become non-vital, and dental surgeons are ending up with opening the root canal for those teeth. This is a case in which patient reported with similar facial pain on the left side. There was no odontogenic cause. There was tenderness. Dental surgeon thought that there is a non-vital tooth. He started with the root canal of these two teeth. On third day, this patient reported to us with exfoliation of one of the premolar. So friend, be very careful, because until and unless there is no identifiable odontogenic cause, the gingiva can absolutely look healthy like this. So don't be in a hurry to intervene thinking as these are non-vital teeth or a cracked tooth syndrome or whatnot. First, be 100% sure that it is not an early sign of mucormycosis. This is another case. Same way, visited dental surgeon with severe pain. Dentist started root canal with two premolar on the right side. Then after third day, there was spontaneous exfoliation of one of the premolar. And then patient when visited to us, there was a changes in the mucosa as well. There was exfoliation, exposed a necrotic bone. So friends, if there has to be pain, if there has to be some sinus formation, we all know at least PDL widening must be there, or there has to be some radiologic evidence of periapical lesion. Without any periapical lesion, if you are getting sinuses like this, these are warning signs. Without having a periapical lesion, it is unlikely that you will have a draining sinus. Yes, in few cases of gingival abscess, you may, but that you can definitely clinically identify. When these patients are in a delayed presentation, like after 2 weeks, they present to dental surgeon, we can have this kind of variety of presentation, like the gingiva may be bogey, swollen gingiva, the abscess formation, there might be multiple draining sinuses, some white ischar or white necrotic slump which is exposed, or it have a picture like wet gangrene or a black ischar. So these are the various clinical presentation which are delayed presentation. So don't expect this kind of presentation in all the cases, because this is after the infection minimum 15 to 20 days. Before that, if you see the patient clinically, they may not have any gingival alteration. The first sign which can appear as a clinical presentation might be attachment loss, small slight bookiness of the gingiva, or a pocket formation. These are initial stages, and after that it can lead to this kind of delayed presentation. This is a typical case of delayed presentation. They will have entire segmental mobility. The teeth will be vertically compressible. You will have draining sinuses on the midline, draining sinuses on the palate. Everywhere you will get the draining sinuses. You can see there is draining sinus on the palate. Yes, this was the cases what we have seen. They were sino-alveolar, so in which the maxillary sinus and maxillary alveolus was involved. Coming to the next variant, that is sino-orbito-maxillary involvement. So in which ethmoid sphenoids are involved, orbits are involved, maxillary sinus is involved, and maxilla is involved. Like this is a typical case. This patient, so these patients may report with pain in the periorbital area, bulging of the eye, that is called as proptosis, inability to close the eye, that is ptosis, restriction of the ocular, the eyeball will not be moving completely, that is called as ophthalmoplegia. So ophthalmoplegia and proptosis, these are warning signs, because whenever there is a proptosis, it means the muscle cone is already invaded by the infection, and that's why the globe is bulging out. And probably this is the point at which patient can lose eyesight. Like this is a patient who reported to us with proptosis, blurring of the vision, restriction of the ocular movement, ptosis, ophthalmoplegia, and this patient lost complete vision. He has applied something, that's why there was partial skin necrosis in infraorbital area. On a clinical examination on palate, there was collectively, and when the MRI was done, so ethmoid sphenoid was involved, the maxillary sinus was involved. So in this patient, you can see all the sinuses were involved. So this is a typical case of sino-orbito-maxillary involvement. So these are cases which are little more advanced, or where there is a probably at early stage also they can present like multiple involvement. These are the cases probably for which I am little worried. Those are sino-orbital presentation. This infection is very aggressive, very rapidly spreading. This is a case, young 32-year-old patient reported to general practitioner with pain in the periorbital area and nose area. The doctor advised for CT scan. Like our routine patients, what patient said, I will get the scan done tomorrow. Patient got the scan done, and by the time patient reported to me in the evening, means within less than 48 hours, there was complete vision loss. There was proptosis, there was ocular muscle involvement, and unfortunately, we have to sacrifice this patient's eye. So the presentation can be only ethmoid. There was on a scan, there was only ethmoid involvement with some degree of maxillary involvement, and there was complete vision loss. So these infections are very aggressive. They are spreading very rapidly. Like if we don't accentuate eye in these patients, probably it can lead to a cavernous sinus thrombosis and cerebral involvement, which can be fatal. So unfortunately, to treat these patients, we have to sacrifice that. Now, these and rhinocerebral will have the other clinical other features of cranial involvement, like vomiting. Patient will be disoriented, drowsy, facial nerve weakness, sixth nerve weakness, third nerve palsy. So these are the clinical presentation along with sino-orbitomaxillary presentation. Like along with this presentation, if you get the vomiting, nausea, disorientation, neck rigidity, neck stiffness, seventh nerve or facial nerve weakness, along with third nerve weakness, that is probably suggestive of rhinocerebral mucormycosis. Now, how we can diagnose this patient? So always first is your clinical suspicion is the most important thing. Once that is done, then we always have to subject this patient for imaging. So what is the imaging modality of choice? The imaging modality of choice is a gadolinium enhanced MRI with fat separation. But probably this facility is not available everywhere. So at least a CT-PNS which is required. So minimum is CT-PNS. Ideal is the gadolinium enhanced MRI with fat separation. If that is available, nothing like that. If that is not available, and particularly if we have, depending on the involvement also, we need to think about imaging modality. If there is sino-orbital involvement, probably in those cases, MRI will be a better modality, because whether the muscle cone is involved or not, that can be better way seen on MRI as compared to other scan. As a dental surgeon, we are all are fond of CBCT. Then what are the advantages of CBCT and disadvantages? We need to understand most of the CBCT, they are not having FOV. Whenever we are evaluating a patient suspected for mucormycosis, at least entire maxilla, both the orbit, some part of the brain, frontal sinuses, and all the paranasal sinuses, we should able to see. If your CBCT scan has that FOV which can cover entire area which is covered in PNS, we can go ahead with the CBCT. But having a soft tissue enhancement is really difficult on CBCT. So if we want a better soft tissue delineation, because in a CT PNS we can get a soft tissue window as well as bony window, so better delineation of the tissue can be seen on that scan. Yes, CBCT has upper hand, particularly when we have multiple metal restoration, and if there is a risk of there is a possibility of scattering. So scattering alters the image in conventional CT scan. Though current advanced all the conventional CT scan, they have a software which can mask the scattering caused by all the metal restorations in the upper jaw. Yes, but in those cases, CBCT can be a modality of choice, but not in each and every case. Yes, you can use it provided you have a sufficient FOV to cover all the paranasal sinuses. After that, after imaging and all, if you find anything of significance, you need to have ENT colleagues who will do a nasal endoscopy for you. If there is any, why we need a nasal endoscopy? Because we can confirm. But early stages, a nasal endoscopy can be insignificant. They will say a normal endoscopic finding, because if the disease is confined to sinuses, if it has not yet invaded into the nasal cavity, on nasal endoscopy they can only see the nostrils. So if the disease is not spread to nostrils, probably the nasal endoscopy may be negative, which doesn't mean that there is no disease. But you have to get it done. If the disease is seen in the form of nasal crust, brag discharge, we can always get that crust. We can send it for KOH mount and fungal culture for confirmation. So how we are going to confirm whether it's a fungal or other kind of sinusitis, chronic sinusitis? So if we get a tissue for KOH mount or nasal lavage, nothing like that, we can do the KOH mount. The KOH mount will give you an idea whether there is fungal infection or not. Fungal culture, definitely it will give an good, but it is difficult to this fungal culture will give typical salt and pepper appearance. But fungal culture also you need to have a good mycologist or a microbiologist who will do proper culture of the fungus, because isolating them is having a culture is really difficult. Histopathology is a confirmatory, particularly mucosal and bone involvement. We can confirm on histopathology. So once we are sure after the clinical evaluation, imaging, nasal endoscopy, and KOH found that there is a mucormycosis. So in this patient, the management part is surgical debridement. So management part will see. So before going for surgery or before treating patient, we have to thoroughly investigate this patient, because we are going to subject them for general anesthesia, for variety of medication. And we know these patients are post-COVID and they have variety of other disorder also. So we need to have complete evaluation. Now, there is a matter of debate, like when we should start treating cases of mucormycosis. Some of the centers are even treating active mucormycosis. Some patients are treating when the RT-PCR is negative, but RT-PCR is not a reliable parameter, because in a severe or extensive cases, RT-PCR may remain positive up to 90 days. So what our physician has recommended, after 15 days, like from the day of positive report, after 15 days, these patients, particularly low to moderate severity patients, they are not in an infectious stage. Yes, you need to have a HRCT to see that the lesions are not active lesions and they are healing lesions, and make sure that because you need to ensure the safety of yourself, your staff, and other patient in the ward, because whether to admit these patients in COVID area or non-COVID area depends on this initial screening. So you have to be very cautious. And once that is done, then you have to get 2D echo done for all the patients, because thromboembolic episodes are very high in this patient. It can lead to myocardial infarction, pulmonary thromboembolism. It can lead to cerebral infarct. CT pulmonary angio to rule out pulmonary thromboembolism. If your 2D echo shows RA, like right atrium, right ventricular dilatation, which are the indicators of pulmonary thromboembolism. HRCT chest is mandatory because you need to see whether the lesions are healing or not, or they are active lesions, because you are going to subject the patient for general anesthesia. Yes, like HRCT score may remain high even, or remain may same or higher than during active COVID infection, because these lesions may appear up to six months after COVID recovery also. So we are operating a patient who have HRCT score of 16 or 18 also, because these are emergency cases. In all the cases, we get ophthalmic evaluation done, because we need to rule out any sort of ophthalmic evaluation. Coming to the management part of mucormycosis, I'm again and again emphasizing that this is an infectious disease. Like, instead of bacterial or viral infection, this is a fungal infection, that's it. And like any other infection, like in a case of odontogenic infection, space infection, the ultimate outcome depends on removing the foci of infection. So whichever area has become necrosed because of the fungal invasion to the vessel and avascular necrosis, that entire necrotic part has to be debrided thoroughly surgically. So surgical debridement remains the mainstay in a management of mucormycosis. Definitely antifungal therapy is required, and it has a very important supportive role. Along with that, we need to manage this patient perioperatively very well, because they have many comorbidities. So without doing proper surgical intervention, only pouring antifungal will not be sufficient. Like even a space infection, if we only keep on giving antibiotic without doing IND or without removing the culprit tooth, it is not going to subside. Similarly here, until and unless each and every single foci of infection is debrided or taken care, they will not respond to the treatment. So I will, how we manage them surgically, I will show you a few of the cases. This is a case in which you can see on a CT PNS, there is a right-sided involvement, there is complete erosion. So this is a delayed case presentation. So in this case, we have to thoroughly debride entire necrotic bone till we see healthy bony margins which are nicely oozing. We have to sacrifice all necrotic bone. If the overlying mucosa is healthy, we always preserve the mucosa so that we can achieve the oronasal separation by mucosal layer, and there will be no oronasal and oroantral communication. So this is a case of same case in which we have resected we have done infrastructure hemimaxillectomy. This is another case with delayed presentation, multiple draining sinuses. So this is after exposure. This is after debridement. This is after closure. So this is another case, multiple draining sinuses. Similar. See, when we expose the maxilla, it looks like little yellowish, discolored, and sometimes we may be in doubt that this looks little healthy. But when we drill at multiple places, there will be no blood supply. Whatever blood you can see in a picture is coming from the gingiva. It is coming from the mucosa and not from the bone. And when we see like outer side, it can look like little yellowish, like people who have seen many cases only will able to differentiate. Other will say, hey, this looks little fine, but when you see inside, it is necrosed like this kind of dirty necrosis we see. This is another case which is delayed presentation. Yes, whenever it is more than a month old, when there is more than 30% demineralization, typically what we are fond of, or we have been taught in the radiology, that it should show typical. This is a typical moth-eaten appearance on radiologically. You can see there is involvement of zygomatic bone and all, and in this case we have to do extended maxillectomy, which was involving even a body of zygoma. And all the cases like a extended hemimaxillectomy, like in this patient, in this case, we have removed till body of zygoma. So everything is possible intraorally. No need to take a Weber Ferguson incision, upper lip split incision. Intraorally, we can very well assess them. Yes, many people were like on a social media, you might have heard this is not probably a mucar because there are a line of demarcation. Friends, the line, whenever their line of demarcation is present, like in this case, between the healthy and non-healthy bone, probably these are delayed presentation. This is the granulation tissue which is formed because of delayed presentation, and not because that there is some other. Yes, sometimes you may get a aspergillosis along with mucormycosis, but it is not that mucor are having this kind of presentation always. This is a delayed presentation in mucormycosis. You can, if the mucosa is healthy, no need to sacrifice the mucosa, preserve the mucosa, because you can achieve a good oronasal separation like this. So that feeding will be easy, speech will be good for this patient. This is another case in which there was sinoorbital involvement, which we have discussed. In this patient, unfortunately, we have to sacrifice the eye. You can see these are the ethmoidal sinuses which are opened. It is filled with dirty necrotic area. We have to thoroughly debride them and make the cavity as clean as like this. You have to thoroughly wash them. Because if we don't sacrifice the eye or globe in this patient, from the optic canal, it can lead to cavernous sinus thrombosis, and which is highly fatal. So to save the life, we have to unfortunately sacrifice their eyes. So eye for life, probably. This is the case in which like sino-orbitomaxillary involvement. Yes, this is what I was talking about. So people say there is always a line of demarcation. No, depending on a time when you are intervening. So in this case, we intervene early. So probably it was 6 or 7 days from the symptom. So when we expose, you can see some degree of mottling with yellowness. When we did multiple drilling, there was no bleeding from the bone. When we opened the window in a maxilla, the sinus was completely filled with the pus. So this was a super added infection. And in this patient, you have to do a total maxillectomy. Like in this case, as there was palatal mucosa which was involved. So we have to sacrifice the necrotic maxilla. We have to sacrifice the eye in this patient, and probably the defect will remain open. We have to pack it with the medicated gauze piece, or you can have interim obturator, or what is called surgical obturator to obturate this defect. Yes, that is a surgical debridement. Surgical debridement. So whenever you get a necrotic maxilla, that's why if the disease is limited to ethmoid and sphenoid, probably by endoscopic surgery, sinus surgery, we can get away. But whenever the maxilla or the bone is involved, we have to remove the necrotic dead bone. And once you have done thorough debridement, complete foci of infection you have removed, after that only your systemic antifungal therapy will work. So we all know the drug of choice in mucormycosis, injection amphotericin B. So the dose is 3 to 5 ml. There are 3 forms of amphotericin which are available. This is probably has become a precious drug. Now currently, as far as the state of Maharashtra is concerned, the distribution is through the government authorities. Like remdesivir, it is a controlled distribution by the authorities. So we have 3 variants. One is what is called as deoxycholate. That is a crystalline variant which is highly nephrotoxic. Second variant is lyophilized, and third is liposomal, and fourth are lipid complex. So probably the best which is suitable for kidney and least nephrotoxic is liposomal. So if that is available, nothing like that, but the dose is 3 to 5 mg. So 4 to 5 vials per day, and minimum for 10 to 15 days, depending on severity. Along with that, we are using posaconazole or isavuconazole as a step down therapy. Once these patients are given injectable amphotericin for 10 to 15 days, depending on the severity, then we have to start them on posaconazole 300 mg daily dose, like in a tablet form or in a syrup form. For next at least 30 days, we have to continue this for the patient, because this fungi is isolated as long as up to 6 weeks from this. Now, when we can like we have to keep this patient on regular follow-up and see continuous irrigations. Post-op follow-up is very mandatory in these patients. So after surgical phase, along with the systemic antifungal therapy, which is the most important factor or equally important factor, is supportive care. These patients required very good respiratory care because they are post-COVID. Their lungs are already fired. When we subject them to anesthesia, many patients can land up with ARDS. Then they need a good chest physiotherapy. These patients are highly infective. Most of the patients which I am operating on second day, their count, the total leukocyte count is 55,000, 60,000, 68,000, up to like 68,000 is too huge. And most of the patients, they require inotropes like noradrenaline on other inotropes, because these patients, they have a septic shock in perioperative phase. We need to take care of their hemodynamic status very well because they can deteriorate otherwise. As this patient can remain bedridden, if they require a ventilatory support, we have to take care of DVT prophylaxis. Good nutritional care is very important aspect in a post-operative phase because that will help in a healing. Yes, this patient need a very good psychological support because they have gone through a huge psychological trauma during COVID, post-COVID, and this is ablative surgical procedures are like, particularly someone has to go for orbital excitation. It's a huge trauma to them, and we need a good psychological support and counseling with these patients. Yes, most of the patients, if they are not insured, they are financially drained out, and by the time they reach to the for mucormycosis, they have exhausted all their resources. So friends, they need good financial support. Probably on this platform, I take an opportunity to congratulate and thank government of Maharashtra for supporting these needy patients. Since last 3-4 days, injection amphotericin B are given free of cost by the government of Maharashtra. The the surgery for these patients is taken care by government of Maharashtra under Mahatma Phule Jan Arogya Yojana. So we are able to cater the poor and needy patients under the government scheme for free of cost. And each and every state need to take aggressive initiative like this for these patients. But the sad story doesn't end here, because this is an impending challenge for all of us. When these patients are recovering from COVID, like this is a patient which I treated after first wave of COVID, reported to me, sir, now please give me a set of teeth. When I saw him clinically, I evaluated, there was only a oronasal separation, and this entire thing is only mucosa. There is no bone underneath. Then these are challenging cases for rehabilitation. When I thought of rehabilitating this patient, luckily zygomas were spared. So what I can see as a reconstructive or a rehabilitative option for this patient, I can go ahead with the cord zygoma implant and maxillary rehabilitation. Other thing, a patient specific implant or a free fibular fab and then implant into that. These are very complex, probably financially also they are going to be an expensive options for these patients. These poor patients, their sad story is not going to end here, and we all have to make collective effort to support these patients in this difficult time of pandemic. So friends, conclusively, I would like to say that be vigilant, because if we detect them at early stage, we can prevent a morbid complication like orbital exenteration or the rhinocerebral spread. Whenever we are with the slightest doubt, always investigate them properly, or at least guide them to oral surgeon who can do rest of the things. In this patient, when we are treating them, we need a meticulous planning because there are many comorbid conditions which has to be taken care. The other aspect like psychological aspect, financial aspect also need a great consideration. In this case, the key to success, early, prompt and aggressive intervention, thorough debridement with systemic antifungal therapy is probably key to success. And I can proudly say that out of 126 patients, our mortality rate is less than 6%. Yes, definitely all these patients are going to be going to come back to us for delayed reconstruction and rehabilitation, which is an impending challenge for all of us. So friends, stay safe, take care, and thank you for your patience listening. Once again, thank you Cynodent for giving me an opportunity to share my clinical presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was an amazing presentation. You took us like for the journey of mucormycosis seminar, like from the basics to advancement and covering all the points, like what is mucormycosis, how does it affect after COVID, and what are its clinical features, what diagnostic imaging should one be doing it, and what should be the management. So it was an amazing and informative webinar for all of us. Thank you so much, sir. Uh, Moving forward to the Q&A session, sir, we have some questions from our audience. So the first question is, what is the most important consideration to be taken care of to get protected from being affected to mucormycosis?
A very good question. Probably I based on that part, a preventive aspect of mucormycosis. First of all, if you like now, task force has given guidelines. Any patient who is a COVID positive on third, 7th, and 10th day, it is mandatory to have maxillofacial, ENT, and ophthalmic evaluation for all the patients, so we can pick up them at early stage. Second important thing, we need to have aggressive glycemic control in these patients. We need to maintain oral and nasal hygiene. We need to boost up the immunity. Probably all these things will prevent the patient from getting a mucor.
Okay. The second question here is, what is the first step any dentist should take if he diagnoses that patient is suffering from mucormycosis?
So first is always, if the patient is post-COVID, always be vigilant when you are taking a history, thorough history. Probably we always say, take a history and patient is leading to you to the diagnosis. Similarly, same is here. Be vigilant. Ask them exactly what patient will tell you exactly what are the symptoms. If you have any doubt, any suspicion, always have a consultation with the oral surgeon or at least do some sort of imaging. Don't see if you find any patient with orofacial pain, particularly in a post-COVID, and if there is no identifiable odontogenic cause, always have a high degree of suspicion for mucormycosis. Don't jump into dental treatment without confirming, like, yeah, probably this tooth may be non-vital, there may be like a cracked tooth syndrome and all, nothing like that. If you don't have any clear-cut odontogenic cause, don't intervene for non-specific orofacial pain.
Oh, okay, sure, sir. The third question, how late is too late in the treatment of mucormycosis, since we have heard that it spreads very rapidly?
Absolutely, I told you that within a 48 hours, someone can lose the eye. So first sign of suspicion, investigate. How early we intervene? Like morning, if 10 o'clock patient is seen in my OPD, we make sure that by 6 in the evening or next day morning 7 a.m. patient is in the theater. So that you have, it is an emergency.
Right, yes, sir. The fourth question, can a mucormycosis or be tested COVID positive immediately after recovery?
You can get the screening done. Yeah, like I'm not getting the question. Like, can we see immediately after COVID infection?
Yes, sir.
So I have seen a case as early as 5th day from the positive report of COVID. So during active COVID infection, also patient are reporting. Forget about after discharge.
Is there any possibility that like after the treatment of mucormycosis, the patient might again get reinfected with COVID?
Again, everyone can get infected again with COVID. I think probably he's asking about mucor can get reinfected or there is a relapse. In a mucor, it is an infectious disease. Whatever current infection is there, we are debriding, we are taking care of that. So whether that patient will again have a mucor, like for example, in few cases we do hemimaxillectomy. Whether the other side of maxilla will get involved or not, it's a multifactorial. Host immunity, how well was the debridement, how good is the sugar control, and how the patient is maintaining the oral and nasal hygiene. Like out of my own data, I have seen three cases with relapse, but 2 of them were operated by ENT surgeon for functional endoscopic surgery, and one of my own case in whom I did a right side maxillectomy, it recurred on the left side. At that time, when we did a cardioid look and cleaning, that time the other side maxilla was healthy and bleeding. So in spite of surgical debridement, in spite of systemic antifungal therapy, there was relapse on the other side. So there is always a possibility, because infection can anyway, any point of time can come back again.
Okay. Sir, in your clinical orientation, did you come across any mandibular infection for
Yes, I
mucus?
said I have seen 5 cases with mandibular involvement.
Okay. Could you just elaborate a little bit about it?
Yeah, mandibular involvement is really very difficult to pick up at early stage, because a patient reported to me there was severe pain on that side which was affected. There was swelling in the submandibular area. When we did a CT scan, one of the ENT surgeon did a CT scan. It was absolutely normal. Then I advised for MRI, but there was a alarming sign or first pathognomic sign. There was a paresthesia of the mental nerve. So there was high degree of suspicion. I did MRI. So on MRI, there was a medullary edema. So medullary edema is a good evidence that then what I thought that we will do, at least because doing a hemimandibulectomy on without having a confirmed diagnosis probably will be a little harsh decision on our part. So we thought we will do one of the tooth extraction and we'll take a biopsy from that side. We'll send it for histopath as well as culture. But when we opened it, there was necrotic black bone, and we got a fungal culture within few hours which was positive. And by the evening we took patient in the theater. We have to do hemimandibulectomy, which was crossing the midline, like till this side it was hemimandible, then to opposite side canine we have to do marginal resection, because we need to maintain the lower part of the chin at least for genial attachment, or else patient may end up with permanent tracheostomy,
Oh, okay.
because we cannot do a reconstruction in a same setting, because in infectious cases the primary reconstruction is contraindicated.
Okay. And like now cases of aspergillosis is being reported. So, any comment on it?
Definitely, like some few of my cases on histopathology, there were mixed picture in which aspergillus as well as mucor was seen. But aspergillus more commonly affect the lungs. So if there is a lung involvement along with maxilla, probably there will be a mixed picture with mucor and aspergillus. The only problem practically as far as management is concerned, the drug of choice for aspergillus is voriconazole. And it is known as a drug which favors the mucor growth. So in those cases, it becomes really a challenging task.
Okay. Okay. That was really insightful. Thank you so much, sir, for giving answers to all the questions. I would now like to call upon Dr. Anmol Bagaria.
Good evening, one and all who are viewing us today, who have joined us for the session. I hope you all are staying safe and doing great. I would thank Sir for giving us his valuable time. And Sir, it was really a very informative lecture, and it is in need of an hour because we are getting new cases every day, and this would help all the practitioners to for better diagnosis and saving lives of the individual. Thank you, sir, for such an informative lecture and giving your valuable time. And thank you, Shritesh, for hosting the event.
Thank you, Dr. Sitesh. Thank you, Dr. Anmol, for the opportunity. Stay safe, take care, and keep doing good work.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, Dr. Anmol and Sinodent team for giving such an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.